This is a Crack House Chronicles production.
Welcome to the Crack House Chronicles, your favorite true crime podcast. I am Donnie, and with me is a man who's decided not to go for a run today, which is like 30 years in a row now. It's Dale.
I got a streak.
Yeah.
And I don't plan on breaking it.
No, he's staying to that streak he's got going on, but he's not running streaking.
No. I'm not streaking or streaker.
No. Dale does not run.
Only streaks I got. Well, never mind. We won't talk about that.
Dale does not run at all.
No.
Or hike.
I get mad if my nose starts running.
Yeah. That's right.
The other day I was going to look at the mailbox next to it. I was like, maybe I'll just, what are you thinking?
Yeah. I can stop on my way back from somewhere.
Yeah.
Get it at the end of the road.
That ain't happening.
What's going on today, dude?
You know, same old, man.
Same old. Back in the Crack House
Back
doing an episode.
in the house.
Doing an episode. What you got going on? You got anybody to talk about?
Hey, look at that. Man, we really appreciate you all stepping up here and giving us some 5 stars. This is amazing.
Yeah, we love it.
Yeah, well, speaking of love it, that's what this one's called. Love it.
Love
5
it.
stars. This
Man.
comes from Kentucky Girl 35.
Man.
Says, I was referred to this podcast by another excellent podcast, Andrea Up Late. She did an update on the ACE degree case. How can I submit a case? ? Thank you and love it. Well, you can just write it down on a $20 bill and send it to people. No, just kidding. Just submit it. All you got to do is email us or go on our socials and shoot us a message and we'll check it out.
Yeah, crackhousechronicles@gmail.com or on our socials, like Dale said.
Yeah, we like getting submissions. Give us something to look at.
And we do get a lot of submissions, and we look at them and we try to write them down and see if we can do them. And it all comes down to finding enough information.
Right. Yeah,
do
because
it.
we don't want to do like a 2-minute podcast.
No.
And we don't want to do like 6 2-minute podcasts and 1 podcast. And so if it's got a lot of information and it's really interesting and cool, we'll dive in and see what we can do with it.
And we have talked about incorporating 2 or 3 stories into one episode.
We have.
Going that route.
What do you guys think about that?
Yeah. Yeah, we've talked about that. So maybe in the future we might do something like that.
Yeah, maybe.
When we run out of murders and missing people.
And we ain't never going to run out
No,
of
it just keeps on going and going, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's pitiful.
it is.
But if anybody else wants to be like Kentucky Girl 35, you can go to Apple Podcasts and leave a 5-star rate and review. Write something in the box. We'll get a notification, and you'll get a shout-out. And also, you can leave a 5-star on Spotify, and you can write something about each episode. Under the episode, you just scroll up from the bottom, and you can write something about there. Or if your other podcast platforms allow it. I've seen others that allow 5 stars. I think Audible does, So you can leave a 5-star rate and review there.
Well, Apple is probably one of our main podcast.
Well, it is our main one that people use.
Yeah, and I think we have a little over 225 ratings or something, so somebody needs to get busy.
Yeah. Get at it, people.
What are you thinking?
Yeah. We see the numbers, and there are thousands of downloads coming from Apple Podcasts.
Yeah, and we
Thousands.
appreciate you listening, don't get me wrong.
But yeah, just smash that rate and review button.
But don't smash it too hard, you gotta get your phone fixed.
Yeah, just hit it and leave us a rate and review.
All right, we're rambling. Let's go.
All right. Dale, after this short break, we're going to get going this episode.
Do it.
All right, man. We are back.
We are.
And, dude, in this episode, we're partly in North Carolina.
We are, partly.
Yeah, part of it takes place in North Carolina and part of it in Virginia.
Virginia.
And we're up in the northeastern part of North Carolina, or if you're in Virginia, you're in the southeastern part.
Well, look at you,
Out
Mr.
toward the
Fancy.
coast. Yeah, just trying to keep it real, keep everybody...
Is that kind of like Alaska being off the coast of Texas?
Yeah, kind of, yeah. Yeah. But Alaska's not off the coast of Texas.
Depends on who you ask.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We might do an episode on that one of these days and talk about that,
It is quite
why that's
humorous.
funny. Yeah. But Dale, like we said, we're up in the eastern part of North Carolina and southern eastern part of Virginia.
All right. Now.
But our story takes place on November the 22nd of 1987.
87.
And this is when a preacher by the name of Wesley Lindquist, he had just finished up a sermon this Sunday morning.
Okay.
And his sermon was on abused women.
Really?
Yeah, which is really weird.
Mm-hmm.
And after his sermon,
Well, and it's not really weird until you add all the details.
Yeah,
and then it's kind of
you're
really
going to be like, that's weird.
There you go.
But after his sermon, he decided to take a drive.
He did.
He was going down south into North Carolina just to take a drive, clear his head, and just see the countryside and think about things.
So I'm assuming they're pretty close to the border here.
Yeah, the Chesapeake area is just north of the North Carolina border. Yeah, so that's where he was from. And he drove down into North Carolina. He had stopped on the side of the road near the Dismal Swamp Canal.
Yeah. This is like Elizabeth City, right?
Yeah, right around Elizabeth City. And he stopped there, and he pulled off the side of the road, and he started to read his Bible.
Okay.
And he read his Bible for a few hours and was doing some praying and thinking and I guess just contemplating life.
I guess.
Yeah. And at some point, he decided to get out of his truck.
Okay.
Or his vehicle, whatever he was driving.
Whatever he was in.
Yep.
I believe it was a truck.
And he walked over to the swamp canal there and was looking down into the water. And Dale, that's when he saw the nude body of a female. And this body was down a rocky embankment. The sides of the bank was brush filled and it was very steep.
Let me guess, he thought it was a mannequin.
Probably did.
They always do, right?
Yeah, most of the time, yeah. But that's when he got back in his truck and he drove up the highway back into Virginia, I guess to find a payphone, because in 1987 there was no cell phones.
Correctamundo.
So he called the police, and it was about 3 p.m. in the afternoon. This is when the police arrived at the scene.
It's about 15 minutes before he got there.
Yeah, which ain't bad at all.
No.
No. And they were on scene, and there was a member of the Chesapeake Police Department. His name was Sergeant Edward Lewis.
Yeah, he was a member of the dive team.
Yeah, they showed up. But, you know, this being North Carolina, very close to the border, the Virginia police, they came into North Carolina looking at this.
Okay.
Because that's where the call came from.
Correct.
Yeah. So they were there on the scene looking around, and like you said, he was on the dive team, and they were looking at the body, and it was a female body that was found there in the water. And they were performing the search, and they described as it appeared it had been dumped down this embankment. And they observed numerous wounds to her body, including scratch marks and a lot of bullet wounds, man.
Well, finding that would definitely tell you that it was dumped. She didn't put herself there.
Very true. But there were also small trees around her body, and the limbs around her where she was at had bullet holes in them. So, and there were also fibers from a small tree that were observed in her hair. So it was a pretty bloody scene. And also there on her body, they noticed a bloody footprint or palm print in the middle of her chest.
No, wait, how are you going to get a footprint or a palm print?
I don't know. Unless they were barefoot, I don't know.
Okay, well,
But I would say it'd almost be a palm print. But who knows? But that's the way it was described.
either that or he has some really weird palms or really weird feet.
Very true.
Okay.
He had hands for feet. Pretty bloody scene, man. But there were also a lot of facial wounds to her body. And she was missing a front tooth. And also there was a green sweater and a bloody undergarment, or they described it as a teddy, with a ripped bottom that were discovered in the nearby water.
Yeah.
Close to where her body
So
was.
she was nude, but the clothes, so they found some clothing in the water around her.
Yes,
Is that
they
what
were.
you're saying?
Yep.
Okay.
And also there were marks on her wrist that looked similar to something that would be left by handcuffs. And one thing they did notice, there were no gun or shell casings or handcuffs or anything found near where the body was discovered. So this Officer Lewis, he assumed that the body must have been dumped because no one could have carried it down this embankment.
Correct.
Yeah. And no blood was found on the ground around where the body was.
Although there was plenty of blood on the body.
Yes. So at about 6:42 p.m. that evening, this is when a man by the name of Thomas Lee Bonney, he telephoned a lady by the name of Vanessa Rogers. She was a dispatcher for the Chesapeake Police Department there in Virginia. And Dale, he asked for an officer named Hardison.
Okay.
And he said that he had discussed filing a missing persons report with Hardison at an earlier time, I guess the day before or earlier that day.
Yeah, because you know how it is, that damn 24-hour period or whatever.
Back then you had to wait
Yeah.
to report somebody missing.
Yeah.
But he was calling back to report that his daughter was still missing. And Officer Anthony Perkins...
Anthony Perkins. Ain't that psycho?
yeah, it is. Anthony Perkins, yeah. Norman Bates. He went to Tom Bonney's home. And that's when he met with him, and he took the missing persons report. And Thomas Bonney stated that he had last seen his daughter, Kathy, at a 7-Eleven store where he took her to look at a truck. Now, just a little bit of background on this family. You know, it was talking about Thomas Bonney. He was married to a woman named Dorothy, and they had 6 kids together. But I hadn't been able to find some of those kids' names. But Kathy, the one that had been reported missing, she was the oldest, and she had a younger sister named Susan. And Thomas Bonney, he owned a auto salvage yard.
Yes.
But that's just a little bit of background on them. And this Thomas, it had been reported that he was a pretty strict father.
For sure.
To his kids. He didn't let them do anything. The older kids, Kathy, and some of the younger ones that were old enough to date, he wouldn't let them date or do anything.
I think Kathy was, 19 at the time?
19, yeah.
Yeah.
And Kathy was working for him at the salvage yard.
Correct.
Yeah, she had actually quit high school to go work for her father.
Yeah, and there's a lot of reports about this family being super, super poor and living in a shack, and she had to quit school to go help the family to make money. But when we looked up the house, it's kind of, don't know about that.
It's in a nice neighborhood, pretty nice house.
I mean, maybe they were struggling for money, but they was definitely not living in a shack.
No, they weren't.
I wonder if he just made her quit school so he could keep an eye on her.
Could have.
You can come on and work for me. What do you need school for? You come work here.
Yeah, could have.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. But Thomas, he was telling the officers that he had took Kathy to a 7-Eleven store.
Right.
Because he had gotten a call earlier that somebody was selling a truck. And it's also been described as a Chevy Blazer.
Yeah.
And the man's name that they were going to meet, his name was John.
Yeah, and that's all he knew.
That's all he knew. Because Kathy had been wanting a vehicle.
Right.
And he decided that this might be a good vehicle because he always bought vehicles for the salvage yard.
Yeah, he's always buying, like somebody had one, a lot of mileage or blown up or whatever he could use for parts. He'd buy it cheap and then sell parts or fix it up and sell it or whatever. So people were always letting him know where one was. And then when this came up about the Blazer, he knew Kathy wanted one, so that's why they were going to go look at this one.
So they went and looked at this vehicle.
So he and Kathy went, yeah.
It's 7-Eleven. That's what he was telling the police.
Go met John.
Yes, this John. Now, while the police were at the Bonnie's home, Officer Perkins, he received a call, and as a result, he took Kathy's driver's license to the crime scene.
Well, that sounds funny, but what it is, he asked for a photo of Kathy from the family, and they gave him her driver's license.
Yes.
Which was weird to me. And at the time, which is also weird to me, they said these Virginia driver's licenses only had a side profile photo. But it's odd to me that, I mean, if you come in my house and ask me for a picture of my girls, they're everywhere. There's not, like, only when I got your driver's license. That's just odd. I don't know.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah.
But this officer didn't tell the Bonnies that they'd received a report of a body being found.
No. He would just tell them they needed something to go on.
Yeah.
You know, to go with this missing persons report.
Yeah, but he thought, well, since, I'm here, I'll get a photograph and then we'll compare it to this body we found.
Correct.
Just to see if we can head this off.
Get it going, yeah.
Yeah. At the crime scene, when they got the driver's license, there was a detective there. His name was Martin Williams. They were unable to make a positive ID with the victim because her face had been pretty much obliterated.
Destroyed, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is sad.
And Detective Williams, he called the Bonnie's house to ask them if he could come back out to their home.
Yeah, to get a different photograph.
That's right. And Thomas Bonney, he told him that it was a little late.
Come back tomorrow.
Yeah. Just come back tomorrow, or I'll leave one in the mailbox, and you just grab it from there if you come by the house.
Yeah, it's kind of late. I need to go to bed.
Dude, if I got a missing kid, and somebody's looking for my kid, actively looking for something, I'm not going to bed.
No.
Mm-mm.
No.
But that was what Thomas Bonney said.
Yeah, it's a little late.
Yeah.
I'll just stick one in the mailbox. Just how about come back tomorrow? To me, this is kind of like how about we'll give you 24 hours, like he's just trying to be a smart,
Yeah.
smart ass.
But getting back to the Wesley linguist that found the body in the Dismal Swamp, he was checked out pretty good.
Is that the name of it? Dismal?
Dismal Swamp. And it's pretty good name for a swamp. You're gonna name one. I mean, whoever named it nailed it.
That's what I was thinking. Wait a minute, is this a description or is this actually the name?
That's the actual name of the swamp, the Dismal Swamp. But they interviewed this Wesley linguist extensively and got his alibi, and it was confirmed that he was in church that day, and he couldn't have been the one to have killed this victim.
Because they were kind of worried about him because he was sitting there for a while, he said, and then he called him. So, and you found his body out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, I'm sitting here reading my Bible for 3 hours, and
and they're going, wait a minute.
Yeah,
But turned out it was a good.
Yeah. But
All right.
he was cleared immediately. So we're moving to the next day. This is Monday, the 23rd of November of 1987. And Detective Williams, he spoke to Thomas Bonney at his place of business there at his salvage yard. And at that time, he told the officer that Kathy had been dating a guy named John Hoskins.
And this guy worked for them.
He did.
Yeah.
Thomas, he had said that he had fired this Hoskins about 10 days earlier.
Correct.
And then reported that he had been looking through Kathy's room there at her house. He was known to go through their stuff and look for stuff. But he said he was going through her room and he found a letter in Kathy's diary.
Well, I think he had an inkling that something was going on. You know, this John guy, I think he was like 21. Even though he was married and had a kid, I think him and Kathy had a little thing going on. And it was kind of a secret thing, but I think Daddy had an inkling on what was going on, and that's why he fired the guy.
Exactly. But he found this letter in her diary, and this letter was shocking to him, and it was described as it being vulgar. And in the letter, Kathy wrote of an affair with this John Hoskins, who was married, like you said,
Yep.
and of a previous sexual relationship.
Yes. And so now he knows for sure what was going on.
So Thomas Bonney, he appeared to be bothered, even when this officer kept the letter. He folded the letter up and put it in his coat pocket.
Yeah.
He's like, "What are you doing? You can't keep this letter." But he said, "This is evidence now, and I'm taking it."
Yeah.
Yeah. And Thomas, he kept repeating the version of what had happened at this 7-Eleven store the night Kathy disappeared.
And I'm sure they're thinking this is weird too, because this guy's super, protective over his kids or whatever. Protective might not be the right word, but anyway. But then he lets her just go off driving a test drive with some guy named John at 9:00 at night, and they don't come back, and he just goes home and goes to bed.
Yeah, because he said when they got to the 7-Eleven store, they were waiting for this guy that owned this Chevy Blazer, and he pulled up, and his name just happened to be John too, not the same John Hoskins.
Right.
And Kathy knew him. This is what Thomas is saying. She knew the guy and hollered at him and, "Hey, how you doing?" and just jumped in the Blazer with him, and they left.
Yeah, that ain't weird at all.
And that's how they still got Kathy's driver's license, because she left her pocketbook and other things there in her daddy's car.
In the Impala.
Yeah, that's what he had, an Impala.
Green.
Now, Thomas Bonney also told the detectives that he and Kathy had driven a wrecker to the 7-Eleven store.
So he's switching up stories?
Yeah, switching up his story a little bit. And I also stated that he suspected of his daughter having an affair, like we said. He kept over and over reiterating this. And he also stated that he found that letter that Kathy had written to this John Hoskins, and he'd given to Detective Williams.
Yeah.
And during the search of Kathy's room, this was on November the 24th, officers, when they were in the home doing a search, they found some adult magazines in Kathy's room and a pair of handcuffs in her closet. Yeah.
And I think it was at this time that they went ahead and dusted for fingerprints so they could actually find something a little bit more to maybe help them identify that body if it happened to be her.
Yeah. And I don't think Thomas was too keen on this coming to the house and doing fingerprints.
I don't either.
He said, she went missing somewhere else. Why are you here at my home doing this?
Right. You could be out there looking for her.
Exactly.
Yeah. Especially if they're pulling out adult magazines and handcuffs. I'm sure he ain't tickled with that.
No, not the daddy. No, how protective as he is, not letting him do anything. So just a few days later, on Wednesday, November the 25th of 1987, the body of the victim they found there in the Dismal Swamp was identified as that of Kathy Bonney.
So they used those fingerprints.
They did. They couldn't identify her by the photograph they had in her face. Her face was just too messed up.
That is awful.
Yeah. And when Thomas and his family was told this, Thomas, he got really upset.
Yeah, very.
He began yelling and fell on the floor.
Yeah, he was having chest pains and the whole works. They had to call paramedics.
Yeah.
Come out and check on him. And just figured that actually he was just really hyperventilating.
Yeah, and even Thomas's mother was there, and she was saying later that it just seemed over the top.
Yeah.
Him acting this way. But I can't imagine losing a kid, so I don't know how I would act.
Yeah,
I don't know.
There is no correct way to act.
No. So on that Friday, November 27th of 1987, Detective Robert Cassello of the Chesapeake Police Department spoke with the Bonney family. And Thomas gave a description of the man, John, that they were going to meet at the 7-Eleven for the purposes of preparation of a composite drawing.
Okay.
So he was sitting there describing this John guy to this sketch artist. And he was going through all the stuff, telling how the eyes were, the eyebrows, the nose, the facial features to this sketch artist.
Correct.
And Dale, when they got done, the sketch artist looked at it, and other detectives looked at it, and it was a picture of the sketch artist. He had just sit there and described the guy that was drawing the picture to him.
I'm sorry, but it's just funny.
It was a self-portrait, pretty much. And when I read this and studied this case, the only thing I could think of was these people who sit out here on these little touristy places that draw your picture when you come up to them, and make them like a cartoon.
Yeah,
cartoon. That's what I imagined. you imagine looking at that picture and it looks like...
Turn around and look at damn, that's me.
Yeah, but that's what he had done.
Yeah, Lord.
So they got to look at this Thomas Bonney a little sideways.
Yes, sir, for sure.
Yeah.
Something's going on here.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have just made up anybody. You just sat there and described the guy to himself.
You could have described anything.
Yeah.
But, yeah, Dale, he's over the top on this part.
Oh, Lord.
But Thomas, he kept over and over describing how he didn't like Kathy's sex life, everything she was doing, and that letter he found. That's all he talked about. And wanting that letter back.
That's weird.
Yeah. So that same evening, after this sketch was taken, the detective Williams, he talked to Thomas Bonney again about the incident with the Blazer.
Correct.
And on this occasion, Thomas stated that he was driving his Chevrolet, not his wrecker, when he and Kathy went to the 7-Eleven store.
So now he's flopped back again?
He has. And Thomas also reported that his .22 caliber sawed-off rifle, which had been stolen from his wrecker about the time John Hoskins had been fired.
Now, this rifle was also a single-shot rifle. So
yes.
Keep that in mind.
Yes, that's right. So that following Monday, on the 30th of November, Thomas Bonney told Detective Williams that he had sold his Chevrolet a few days earlier to a black man who worked at a junkyard. As a result of Williams, begin to look for this car.
Yeah,
they were trying to find this car.
Right. The car that turns into a wrecker and back to a car.
Yes, right. So this Detective Williams, he met with Thomas Bonney on Thursday, December the 3rd, and he came into the police station to look at some photographs. And again, Thomas said he drove the Chevrolet to the 7-Eleven store and not the wrecker.
Okay.
Now, Thomas was interviewed again on Friday the 4th of December, and he was asked by Detective Williams if he owned a 9-shot .22 revolver. Now, Thomas said he used to have one, but he sold it to a black man whose name he could not recall. And he also...
He's got a lot of random black men buying stuff, doesn't he?
It does, yeah. And Thomas Bonney was then asked if he had killed Kathy. Yes. And he denied anything of this and kept repeating that the officers were wrong. And he also maintained that the photographs of the body at the crime scene
was not his daughter.
Was not his daughter.
Right.
Yeah. He said, that's not my daughter. That's not my daughter.
Yeah.
Because her face was completely obliterated. So, kind of get that in a way, but yeah, that's what he was saying.
Yeah, it'd be hard to take.
Yeah.
Either way.
But on December the 10th of 1987, Thomas Bonney called Detective Williams and told him that he had found this Chevrolet at London Bridge Motors in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And later the police arrived to seize the car. But what had happened, Thomas Bonney had went up there.
Yes.
To where this London Bridge Motors was in Virginia. And the owner of that place called the police because they said there was a man here trying to get that car. Yeah, he kept saying, I got to have this car. It's involved in some kind of investigation. I got to have it. So that's why the owner of this motor lot called the police. So they went up there. They actually called the police up there to go over there to check this out because they couldn't get up there that quick. But Dale, they seized this car. Police seized this car. Before all this happened, what had happened was the reason Thomas Bonney was going to look for this car, the social service had came out to their home and took the kids.
Because they're thinking something's going on here.
That's what they're thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, they took the kids and put them in foster care.
Right. And I think what happened is that happened and, they're like, what the heck's going on? And then the detective told told Thomas that, said, look, if you help us find this car, I help you get your kids back. You got to help us for me to help you.
I'll put in a good word.
And we'll see what we can do. So that's when he found it. And he says when Thomas called them, about the car, he said he could hear people in the background talking. And then he said, let me talk to whoever that is. And that's when he let them talk to it and said, whatever you do, do not let that car get out of the sight. And then when they arrived, Thomas was gone, but the car was there.
Yes. So they were able to get that car.
Yes.
So that's why he was trying to find that car so he could get the kids back or something.
Well, he thought he was going to.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Dale, some time passes, and we're moving up to February the 1st of 1988. And Detective Williams and an SBI agent, his name's Kevin McGinnis, they go to Indianapolis, Indiana. And they find out that Thomas Bonney has been arrested there. Yeah, he had fled.
So when he left from the car, I guess he just took off?
He did. So they go to there and go into Indianapolis, Indiana to get this guy. And Agent McGinnis interviewed Thomas Bonney after reading him his rights. And during this conversation, Thomas said that he had not been running. He said he'd left Chesapeake on December the 11th and that he'd been in several states. And he said that on Friday, November the 20th of 1987, he was saying again that he found copies of the letters Kathy had written to this John Hoskins. And he confronted Kathy with this information while they were in this Chevrolet parked on the side of Highway 17. And he claimed that Kathy had lunged for his gun or had slid out from under the seat or something. And the gun just went off. And when asked if in fact he shot Kathy, Thomas said he shot her while they were parked in the car. And he said that he had left her body along Highway 17 and then driven home.
Well, now.
Yeah.
And he said later that something had just snapped in his head?
Yeah, after he shot Kathy, something just snapped.
I guess. So now we're saying that there was no Blazer or whatever the whole time? Is that what it looks like?
Dale, there was at some point before they were going to look at this Blazer, Thomas's wife and their youngest daughter, Susan, or the daughter below Kathy, her name was Susan, they just got home from the grocery store, and they had heard Thomas talking on the phone to a guy about looking at a Blazer.
Okay.
So it could have been possible
that they were...
This was actually what was going to happen.
Right. So maybe they were going to go look at the Blazer, and then he had this on his mind, so he just pulled over to talk to her.
About this letter.
Yeah, before they got there, and then stuff went sideways.
Yeah, that was eating at him bad.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think that's where it happened.
It's possible.
Yeah. Something just clicked in his mind, and he killed her. So on February the 2nd of 1988, Detective Williams and Agent McGinnis, they returned to the jail to take Thomas Bonney back to North Carolina. And while at the airport, he repeated that he and Kathy argued about the letters. And he stated that at the time he had his pistol under his coat on the front seat. And he claimed that Kathy had lunged for the pistol, although he didn't remember reloading or how many shots had been fired. He stated that he had continued to shoot Kathy, and he thought she screamed when she first was shot. And Thomas also said that he did not shoot Kathy and then drove to the scene. But
he's all over the place.
But that everything had taken place there, and he also admitted that he had removed Kathy's clothes. And he had carried the gun and extra bullets with him that night. And he also stated that he had thrown his gun over the bridge into the river at Battlefield Boulevard, and that he had put the spent shell casings in the gas tank of the wrecker there that belonged to the auto salvage that he owned. So there was a pathologist, a forensic pathologist. His name was Dr. Lawrence Harris, and he performed an autopsy on November the 23rd back in 1987 of Kathy Bonney. And an external examination, Dale, it revealed multiple gunshot wounds. There were numerous scratches to her body, which probably had been made by the brush going down this embankment.
Yeah.
And in his opinion, some of the scratches were made before her death and some were made after her death. And this Dr. Harris noted that 2 of the gunshot wounds to the body were close together and had been inflicted at close range. And those 2 wounds were over the left forehead. The wounds were nearly parallel, and the bullets entered the brain cavity. And the weapon was only inches from the head when the shots were fired.
Yeah, so she wasn't grabbing no bullet, no gun, and it just goes off.
Exactly. Now, 6 gunshot wounds to her head resulted from shots fired from a distance.
To her face.
Yeah, to her face. Yeah, with no gunpowder residue or burning or stippling or anything like that. And one of these wounds broke teeth in the upper jaw. And there were also 3 gunshot wounds to the neck.
Dang.
And the bullets making those wounds traveled upward into the brain. And there was a group of 10 gunshot wounds to the chest. And 7 of those were near the left breast, and 4 of them went through the heart, Dale.
Dang.
And a group of 6 separate gunshot wounds went through the lower legs. And this Dr. Harris, he identified a total of 27 separate gunshot entrance wounds to her body.
27.
Yeah, so in his opinion, 4 or 5 of the gunshot wounds were made after death.
So, 27.
Yeah,
He
so
had a 9-shot pistol.
he had
So he emptied it and then reloaded twice.
yes,
Emptied it, reloaded, emptied it, reloaded, emptied it.
yes.
That's a far cry from a gun going off.
That's a lot of rage. That's a lot of pissed off.
That's a lot of, yeah.
Something. Yeah, so this Dr. Harris, he estimated that the victim had lost 2 to 3 quarts of blood. And from the examination of the photographs of the victim's body at the crime scene, he figured that the wounds to the chest occurred before death. And the cause of death was the multiple gunshot wounds to the chest and face. And in his opinion, the victim would have died in 2 to 3 minutes after the wounds had been inflicted. And it was also in his opinion that the 2 wounds to the head, 8 wounds to the face, and the 10 wounds to the chest all occurred before death.
Good Lord.
And the wounds to the legs occurred after death. And he also figured that the wounds to the face and head would have rendered Kathy unconscious almost immediately, and she would have felt no pain.
Well, at least you got that part.
At least, yeah.
Because I'm thinking, he said you've been 2 or 3 minutes, and all that number, he would have had to already had stopped to reload.
Yeah.
And if he's out in the darn, wherever they are, in the dark, trying to reload a revolver out of bullets out of your pocket, it ain't going to be fast. I'm
No.
sure he didn't have a couple speed loaders in his pocket.
No, unless he's doing it by the truck lights or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's bad.
Yeah. And getting back to all the forensic stuff, there was an SBI agent. Her name was Lucy Milks. She testified that she examined the body and used a standard rape kit. And in examining the body, she found no evidence of sexual activity. She hadn't been raped or anything like that.
Well, at least it's that.
She also examined the defendant's car and performed a field test, which indicated that there was blood on the front passenger seat.
Mm-hmm. And on the door handle.
Yes.
Of the passenger side.
And from cutting of the seat, she later determined that it was human blood and was consistent with Kathy Bonney's blood type. There was no DNA back then, so it was Kathy's blood type.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it was also the same type on the teddy or whatever they had found. So it all matched up.
Yep. Now, when this car had been back at the house after all this happened, the younger daughter, Susan, she had actually noticed the blood in the car and told her mom about it. And the mom just sort of brushed it away, said it could have been animal blood because he'd always, for some reason, have an animal in the car or carry an animal, dead animal, for some reason.
Yeah, okay. That don't sound made up at all.
No, but...
Oh, don't worry about it. You probably picked up a dead dog or something off the side of the road.
But, reading this stuff and looking into all this, I think the mom, Dorothy, Thomas's wife, she covered for him a lot.
Yeah, I think she knew a little more than she's letting on.
Yeah, I think so, too.
But then again, she might be scared of him,
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what's going on.
Very true. We'll talk about all this. We'll analyze all this a little bit later.
Okay.
Now, there was an agent, Troy Hamlin. He was a forensic chemist with the SBI. He also testified as an expert, and he examined known hair of Kathy Bonney and found it to be consistent with hair removed from the rear and the trunk of the defendant's Chevrolet that he was driving.
From the rear seat?
Yeah, the rear seat, yeah. So Kathy at some point had been in that trunk.
So apparently he shot her, put her in the trunk, and then took her to wherever she was found.
Exactly. Now, there was a George Bess. He had said that an employee at Tab's Auto Parts, he testified that sometime near the end of 1987 or the beginning of 1988, he discovered 22 caliber shell casings in the gas tank of the Record that had belonged to Thomas Bonney.
Yes.
And at the time, that Kathy was killed.
Yeah, that's how they found him.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think he had sold this wrecker off to somebody else, and they were having problems with the fuel line or something. They thought so. When they removed the gas tank, they found the shell casings.
That's just weird, man.
Which is wild. Yeah.
At this point, Dale, they're bringing in a clinical psychologist, an expert, to check Thomas Bonney and analyze him a little bit. And his name was Dr. Paul Dale. He said that he had conducted a series of interviews with Thomas Bonney beginning in July of 1988. And he had given him a series of personality tests based on his examination. Dr. Dale formed the opinion...
Not me.
No, D-E-L-L. He formed the opinion that Thomas Bonney had suffered from multiple personality disorder,
Ooh.
post-traumatic stress disorder, and mixed personality disorder. And his primary diagnosis was the multiple personality disorder.
Oh, wow.
This is what he was saying. And this Dr. Dale testified that he had identified 10 separate personalities in Thomas Bonney.
Wait a minute. Now, this is getting a little weird.
Yeah, 10 of them. And he said that multiple personality disorder occurs in childhood and results from severe childhood trauma.
Wow.
And in Thomas's case, the trauma was the death of his maternal grandmother. And this was when he was 10 years old. And this Dr. Dale identified his 10 separate personalities by name. And Tom, the host of this personality, there was one called Satan, Mammy, Demian, Viking, Tommy, Hitman, Preacher, Dad, and Kathy.
And Kathy.
Yeah, he had all these personalities in him.
According to Dr. Dale.
Yeah.
And he identified these with the use of hypnosis.
Yes, he did. And this Dr. Dale was saying that each personality had a function which enabled Thomas Bonney to cope with the trauma he had experienced.
Yeah, I think he had his dad was severely abusive towards him as well.
I think he beat him with a belt until he bled.
And it is depending on, where we seen a lot of stuff where he would make him do stuff, get out there and cut the grass one blade at a time and be just overly abusive stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's just another way to cope, I guess,
according
to him.
And Dale, all these interviews with Thomas Bonney were recorded on videotape.
Yes.
And the tapes were admitted into evidence to illustrate this Dr. Dale's testimony.
Yeah, they had hours and hours, wasn't it?
Like 24, 25 hours. And they said that this Damien was in control when the defendant, Thomas, shot Kathy.
Yeah, and that's D-E-M-I-N.
Demian.
Yeah.
Not Damien, but Demian.
Right.
I may have called it Damien.
Well,
earlier.
and it may be pronounced the same way, but I'm just putting that out there.
Yep. But this Damien character, he believed he was shooting his father, who had abused him in childhood. Yep. And Dr. Dale testified that Thomas was suffering from multiple personality disorder, like we said, and post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah, and I think the reason they thought it was the father is because when they got into it, she just, was saying stuff to him that really pissed him off, and then she had said a couple of phrases or something that his daddy had said to him, when he was small, and it just kind of set him off.
I think she called him a bastard.
Yeah, a bastard and a lazy bastard, a no good bastard, or something like that.
And that was something his daddy had said to him.
Yeah, whatever it was, some stuff that, yeah, exactly. And then supposedly the switch flipped, and then that's when the Demian popped out.
Yeah. You know what this reminds me of? That movie, Primal Fear, with Richard Gere. Edward Norton.
Yeah.
Yeah. Edward Norton had the...
Ooh, that was good.
Different personalities and stuff. Oh, yeah. But that's what it reminded me of. But that's a little tangent there. But, yeah. Now, there was a John McClung. He was Thomas's former business partner, and he had testified that he had known Thomas for about 14 years, and he was also a friend of Kathy. And he described Thomas's history of having a poor memory.
Yeah.
And he was also described as abrupt mood swings concerning the Bible and religion.
So he's all over the place.
Yeah. He also mentioned Thomas's love-hate relationship with his father, like we talked about.
Yeah.
And said that he had never seen Thomas physically abuse any of his children. And it was his opinion that Thomas loved Kathy. And he also testified that near the time of this murder, Thomas had not been acting normal or like he was in his right mind.
In quotes.
Yeah, in quotes, yeah. And on cross-examined, this Mr. McClung acknowledged that Kathy had told him that Thomas had hit her on prior occasions. And also admitted that he had stated previously that Thomas was streetwise and that he knew the difference between right and wrong. This is what his business partner was saying.
Correct.
So there was a rebuttal, and the prosecution presented Dr. Philip Coons, who was found by the trial court to be an expert in clinical psychiatry, multiple personality disorder, and hypnosis. And Dr. Coons had reviewed approximately 13 hours of the videotape that they'd done of these interviews. And between the defendant and Dr. Dale, all these tests were given. This Dr. Coons, he did not review the defendant and made no diagnosis of the defendant.
He didn't interview.
He didn't interview him at all.
Right.
And he was critical of the methods used by this Dr. Dale in reaching his conclusions. He was almost saying that he was being baited with information, and Thomas was looking at, hey, this might be an out.
So you're saying he was leading him along while he was under hypnosis?
Yes, that's what he's saying.
Wow. Yeah, he was just basically letting him ramble on and then asking him leading questions to try to make it fit the profile.
Yeah, and Thomas like, I might could get out of this if I play this game.
Well, if he's under hypnosis, I don't think he's saying that, is he?
Yeah, maybe he couldn't be hypnotized. I don't know.
Or maybe he was thought about this after they say it. I don't know. It's kind of weird.
But it was decided in court that the jury was going to see the entire 20-plus hours of this interrogation, or this, not interrogation, but the tapes that Thomas Bonney had done with his psychiatrist, the Dr. Dale.
They're going to let the juries decide.
Yeah, they looked at all 20-plus hours of this.
Wow.
And they spent over several days letting them watch these tapes. Every bit of it was admitted.
So I guess they have their expert. But we just let you look at it and you decide.
But after all this, a jury found Tom Bonney guilty of first-degree murder on November the 25th of 1988. This is almost a year after his daughter was dead.
Which is pretty quick.
Yeah, it was after a 7-week trial, and sentenced him to death on November the 30th. Yeah, he got the death penalty. But Thomas Bonney appealed the verdict, and the North Carolina Supreme Court voided the death sentence on June the 12th of 1991. Although the murder conviction was upheld.
Right.
The court found that the defense had presented strong evidence in mitigating factors, including a dissociative identity disorder, which they call DID.
Yeah, same thing as multiple personality.
It is. And the jury in the original trial had been improperly instructed in its consideration of the death penalty. The case was remanded to the Superior Court in Camden County, North Carolina, pending a psychiatric examination of Thomas Bonney. So after Bonney was found competent to stand trial, the resentencing hearing began in the Chowan Superior Court on August 24th of 92. As Bonney's guilt had already been established, the new jury was only to fix the punishment.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was guilty, but
we know he's guilty. We just need to know what to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the hearing was aborted after an outburst by Thomas Bonney in the courtroom.
I want to know what he said.
I'd like to know, too.
I tried to find it, but I couldn't.
Yeah, so this forced the judge to declare a mistrial.
Right.
And Thomas's attorneys claimed that he was incompetent to stand trial and did not understand the proceedings.
Yeah.
So the judge ordered a new round of psychiatric treatment for Thomas Bonney.
And guess what?
Yeah.
He's fit to stand trial.
He goes back to trial.
So I wonder if they just told him to do that, act crazy, and we'll see if we can get you off again.
Probably. Yeah.
I mean, what would you do?
Yeah. Or not say it in so many words, but,
Right.
Yeah. Because he'd been led on all these other times. But Thomas Bonney was eventually sentenced to life in prison by the Camden County Superior Court on October the 16th of 2007.
Right. So they redacted the death penalty, but still give him
life.
Yeah. No parole.
That's right. So you think this is where this would end, Dale?
You think?
But it doesn't.
What now?
Thomas was in prison, and he actually made a escape attempt. Yeah, this was during his first trial. He actually jumped from the car in which he was being transported and ran for about 50 feet.
So he didn't get far.
He was handcuffed. He was actually still handcuffed before he was apprehended. Yeah. So Thomas Bonney, he was remanded to Central Prison here in North Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah, he's there for a while. And Dale, there's another escape.
Another escape.
Yeah, another escape. Him and another inmate, they hide in a trash compactor truck. Yeah, they actually get out of prison and are on the run.
Well, he and this guy named Stromer, who was a former East Carolina University lecturer, had been serving a life sentence for rape, kidnapping, and burglary.
Oh, man.
And a conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. Now, Stromer had a janitorial job in the prison hospital, and he didn't report for work on a Friday morning, and Bonney had a job in a prison's trash room, but the work didn't allow him to access the compactor, though. Now, authorities believe the two men got into this compactor at 8:30 on a Friday morning, but they didn't believe they had gotten out of it.
No.
Said there was only like a 4-inch space between the metal chute leading into the compactor, and once the trash is in there, a hydraulic cylinder rams the garbage. So, in the compactor, which is always locked, is then taken to a landfill and dumped.
Yeah.
So they don't know exactly what's going on, and 4 inches is not very much.
No, it isn't. So they thought, when they got into this compactor, they thought they had gotten killed.
Yeah. Now, I would think, you would be able to tell if somebody was they would be a mess, I would think,
You'd think.
in the middle of all this trash. I mean, I don't know, but that was my thought. I'm thinking, they're thinking, well, they probably did. I'm like, if there's not a lot of stuff leaking out the bottom, maybe not.
And that's true.
But prison officials trying to determine how the two inmates were able to gain access to the compactor through these locked doors. And they said, basically right now they was treating it as an escape, but it's possible they were also killed in the compactor.
And they went to the landfill to look for this trash that had been dumped out of this compactor.
Right.
And they didn't find anything.
They didn't find anything.
No. But they did discover that two men had stolen a car and driven to Hampton Beach. But Thomas Bonney was captured by police 4 days later.
Yeah.
And he offered no resistance.
Yeah, he said he was only trying to get out to go visit his mother's grave, who had passed away, and he was not allowed to go to
While
the
he was in
funeral
prison?
because he was in prison. So he said that he went to go see his mother's grave and go see Kathy's grave, and he said if he wasn't caught, he probably would have turned himself in so he could go back and get medical treatment and stuff, because he had injured himself while escaping.
Yeah.
So to go give his medication and medical treatment. So that's what he told him anyway.
Yeah. But, man, it's just a crazy story,
It
Dale.
is crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy story about a crazy guy.
Yeah.
So what do you think? Are you buying into this 10 personality story, or you think it's all a farce? Or
I think he had a lot of issues as far as his control over the family and his daughters, what they could and could not do, and he wanted to be the final say in everything.
Yeah, and I get that.
Yeah.
To a certain extent.
And he did not want his daughters dating at all. And there had also been some reports of Kathy being sexually abused through her childhood by Thomas.
And I wonder if that was true.
I don't know, it's been reported because Kathy had a good friend. Her name was Jill. Her name hadn't been given out. Her last name hadn't been given out. But
Right.
Jill had made a statement that she had asked Kathy at one point if her father was abusing her. And Kathy just held her head down and just cried and didn't want to talk about it.
So something may have happened, right?
Yeah.
And also, Susan, the younger daughter, had reported at one time, because like one time when Thomas was gone, the detectives went over to talk to the wife and the children alone, because they wanted to see what was really going on in that house. And she made the report of where one night she had woken up and Thomas was standing over with a knife.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe he did have some psychological problems. I don't know about this 10 people inside. I mean, yeah, I guess it could be true, but something happened. You just don't go. I mean, even if you are weird, you're doing weird things with your kids, to where you're going to shoot your kid 27 times.
Unless he was just overcome by her having this sexual relationship with this married man, finding that letter.
Yeah.
And it just triggered something in his head.
But 27 times?
That's overkill.
I mean,
man.
that's way overkill. That's reloading this gun. I mean, emptying it 3 times.
Yeah.
It's not like he just, if it had been 9, I can say, okay, yeah, because, that's just where you just pull the trigger to it. Just keeps clicking,
Yeah.
And we're talking about a revolver here, not an automatic where you just pop out the magazine and put a new one in. This is physical reloading.
That's right.
I mean, that I don't know. I just don't see how you black out and do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But
If
they
you
all,
mean standing there blacked out, still pulling the trigger, but nothing's happening because you already shot all the things. I don't know.
and also they said that he couldn't have had these personalities because he wouldn't have had the wherewithal to put those shell casings in that gas tank of that wrecker.
Well, I don't know about that either, because I mean, if you had a personality that you don't know what's going on, because apparently the way it works is if this personality is the one running the show, nobody else, the other 9 don't know what's going on until they click in and out, supposedly. So if the one who done the killing put the things in the gas tank, the other 9 don't know he done that.
Very true.
If I mean, and I'm just saying, I don't know. I'm not the real Dr. Dale. So, but I'm just saying that to me that's the way it looks.
Yeah.
I mean, it could have happened if indeed he had that mental issue going on, I guess. But it's still far fetched to me.
Mm-hmm. It is a crazy case, and
it is a crazy case, and it was pretty sad. She was a beautiful girl, young girl with a promising future, and
yeah, some of her friends said that she loved to write, and she even liked to write crime stories. I don't know if they were true crime or fictional crime, but she was a really good writer, and that's what she was wanting to do.
Yeah, and it was just devastating.
Yeah, very controlling, man. Dale, there's some stuff on this in the media. A guy named Ted Schwartz, in 1992, he wrote a book called Deadly Whispers.
Yes.
And it's a documentary of this case, and it's just mainly based on court documents, where Tom or his wife Dorothy were given some interviews. And in 1995, there was a television made for TV movie
right
called Deadly Whispers, the same name.
Yes.
It was inspired by this book. It's described as a fictional plot, but it's very similar to this Bonney case.
Yeah, and we both watched this movie, and it kind of is, kind of ain't. But it's also has Tony Danza starring as Tom in this movie, which I thought he done a great job.
He did, yeah.
But yeah, it gives a little bit. It's a little bit different than the real story, but I don't know.
Yeah,
it's worth a watch. It's not bad.
We've talked about this too, and it portrays them in the movie as a bunch of hillbillies.
Yeah, just like an old shack and old dirt road and driving a raggedy truck, and and he's always being cold. It's just kind of funny to me. He's like, first starts out and he's looking for his coat, and it's 75 degrees out and he's cold, and it seems like every time they're trying to get you to think that when you get all into the movie, you kind of figure out that when he's switching personalities, he gets cold. Because he goes back to thinking when his daddy had him out in the yard making him cut the grass, and he stays cold, and he keeps turning the heat up, saying he hates the cold. And I'm thinking, damn, do I have multiple personalities because I hate the cold? It's kind of funny, but it's a decent movie.
Yeah,
I thought it was pretty good. There's a show called Swamp Murders that did an episode on it, and American Justice also covered this.
Yeah,
I hadn't seen the American Justice because I couldn't find it because I didn't want to pay for it to watch it, but
you're streaming.
But I did watch Swamp Murders.
Yeah,
I thought it was a good.
Swamp Murders was actually season 1, episode 1 on this.
Yeah, and I thought it was a pretty good portrayal.
Yeah,
but the movie's a decent watch. But when you know the full story or the real story, it's a little bit wide. But I guess you have to do that to make a movie.
Yeah, but Thomas Bonney is serving his time in Central Prison in North Carolina.
He's still there.
He's still there. Yeah, and he's not getting out.
No.
All right, Dale, that is the death of Kathy Bonney.
It is.
Sad story, man. Beautiful girl, gone too soon.
Yes.
Yep.
Very violent.
All right, man, we're going to get out of here, bud.
All right, let's roll.
We want everyone to be safe. Please be careful and always be aware of your surroundings.
Because the next episode could be about you.
This is the Crack House Chronicles.